The question that I thought of, and it's taken me a while to think of it for today, is what is the value of tradition? Now, personally, I generally don't value tradition very much, or I haven't in the past, and because of these ideas that I've been thinking about, I'm going to try and value tradition better. But the reason I haven't valued tradition is because I generally don't think that just because something has been done that way all the time, that it's a good idea. I mean, I don't see how that makes sense. But here are some ideas that I thought of for why tradition is valuable. And I feel like I have to preface what I say with just saying that I don't know. And I want to say that a lot because I don't want to sound like I think that I know, because I don't think that I know. So, why is tradition valuable? I have a few ideas that I've been thinking about. The first one, it kind of sounds like a logical fallacy or an appeal to the people, but it really isn't. The first idea is that if a lot of people think something, it is more likely to be true than just a few people think that it's true. It doesn't actually improve whether or not it is true, but it is more likely to be true if a lot of people think it. So the thing about tradition is that if a lot of people over a bunch of generations have realized that this is a good thing or have done it this way, then it is more likely to be a good idea than just a random new idea that we thought of. Now, what's interesting about the way this works is that generally a tradition, in the sense of a working tradition, or we do it a certain way because it works well that way, is because somewhere back in the line people were thinking of different ideas in different ways of doing things, and they picked that one, and they picked that one for a reason. So that's one thing about the value of tradition. It allows us to draw on the knowledge or the insight of the people who have come before. Now, another one of the values of tradition is kind of a different sense. It's kind of a working tradition. Another sense of tradition is in a religious sense. Like, some of the values of tradition and religion are that things were established this way because it helps us, or we know that it is good. Like, Christ established the tradition of taking communion because that helps us to remember him. And so that's also a kind of tradition. And so I think tradition is generally useful or a good thing because it helps us to draw on other people's knowledge who have come before us, who have decided that something is a good idea, and it also can especially help us to remember in examples of religion. Now, what are some problems with tradition? I guess that's a second question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it seems relevant. Why is tradition not valuable sometimes? I think the problem with tradition is when we take other people's knowledge too much for granted, or when we stick to something just because it has been done this way. If we stick to just doing things the way they've always been done, then we kind of fall into pitfalls where sometimes it's no longer useful to do it that way, etc. Take, for instance, the story of, like, the daughter who asks her mother, why do you cut off the ends of the pork when you stick it into, like, a skillet? You're cooking pork. I don't know. Do people cook porks in skillets? I don't know. But anyway, she asks her mother, why do you cut off the ends of the pork when you stick it into the skillet? She says, I don't know. That's the way my mother always did it. So the little girl goes to her grandmother and says, why did you cut off the ends of the pork when you put it into the skillet? She says, mother just always did it that way. So then she went to her great-grandmother. I don't know why this girl's great-grandmother is still alive, but in the story, she is. So she goes to her great-grandmother and asks her, why did you cut off the ends of the pork when you stuck it into the skillet? She said, well, because my skillet was too small, so it didn't fit otherwise. Sometimes tradition isn't so useful. Sometimes it was done that way one time, and it shouldn't be done that way anymore. That, I think, is one of the pitfalls of tradition, is taking it too much for granted when it's no longer useful. Another one of the pitfalls is that people aren't perfect, and people who have died and thought of things a bunch of years ago, and everyone's done it that way since, aren't any more perfect than the people who live now. So, just because something has always been done that way doesn't mean it was even a good idea to begin with. I think we ought to question the traditions that we have, but we shouldn't completely disregard the fact that these traditions have been established and they've lasted. So, that's what I think. And I guess that is about it.